Welcome back to your Home Inspector Training. I am Garth Haslam. In this segment, I want to cover something that I believe is probably the most key ingredient to you being successful as a home inspector. And no, it has absolutely nothing to do with how much you have prepared yourself knowledge-wise to be the home inspector. In this case, it is about you and the relationships that you create, how honest you are and how honest you come across. As basically these guys are making a anywhere from a couple $100,000 decision to a $500,000 decision, whatever it is. Maybe it's a $5 million decision, but they are placing huge levels of confidence in your abilities to guide them as to move forward or not, or somewhere in between. You're getting a ton of responsibility, because they are expecting you to know everything that there is to know about every subject that they have any interest in. And, so preparing yourself knowledge-wise is great, but they've got to understand that you are and appear to be honest and straightforward. So that's huge. Now, honesty, for me, being honest results in you appearing to be honest. I don't know how to appear to be honest other than just practice at being honest all the time. So that's important to me. If you're going to be on my team, I've got to have people who are honest. One aspect of honesty is admitting what you don't know. So for example, in the podcast for homeowners, I've done about 53 different categories of home inspection related issues, everything from raccoons to spiders to asbestos to meth to electrical, plumbing, roofing. List goes on and on. And as the home inspector, you are going to be expected to be an expert in all of those categories. And of course, the reality is there's no way you can be an expert in all those categories, especially until you've been out there, you've done hundreds of home inspections, you've done perhaps 1,000 hours of research. In order to just kind of be at a very basic level for what you need to be for a home inspector. And you're not going to be there in every different category, especially unless you're an old man like me. So honesty basically means that if you don't have the answer, you don't make some crap up. You admit that you don't have the answer. You say, basically, I'll look it up, I'll find it, and I'll get the information to you in the report that I write tonight. That's one of the reasons why you like to have the buyer there, is so that they know what you looked at and you know what their concerns are, and you can address those concerns rather than get a phone call 5 days later and say, hey, do you remember the red house on the corner that had the plumbing? And especially if you're me, the answer to that question is always no. I have trouble remembering the house I did yesterday, but that's another one of the reasons why you want to have the guy there. Now, honesty, huge. You cannot succeed as a home inspector unless you are honest and appear to be honest, and I guess those two may be pretty much the same thing. So, I guess the difference, now that I'm kind of ad hocing this, is that if one example of appearing to be honest or not appearing to be honest, even if you are, is maybe you're not showing up in the right stuff. Maybe you don't have a professional shirt that says, this is my company logo. Or maybe you show up in a dilapidated car with rust spots all over it. Or, I don't know, maybe your hair is wrong, or maybe you got the tats in the wrong place, or whatever that might be. Those sorts of things throw a kink in the works as far as the client's trusting you. So make sure you've got that base covered, whatever that may be for you. Be aware that you do have two sets of customers, and you've got to keep both of them happy. One is the home buyer, and if you don't make him happy, he's going to report back to the realtor and tell the realtor that you suck, in which case the realtor's not going to call you anymore. And if you make him really unhappy, then he's going to sue you. And that sort of thing can be a career ender too, because that kind of stuff gets around. Last thing anybody needs is to be sued. The other side of the coin is you've got the buyer and he's a client, but you also got the realtor and they're a client. and their goals and needs are not the same. The buyer just wants to be given information straight and wants to know if he could be guided towards a sane investment decision in buying this house. The realtor has similar issues, but he also needs you to not screw up the deal if it is truly not a deal that needs to be screwed up. Most of the good realtors, and there are a lot of good realtors out there, I know a lot of good realtors, most of the good realtors actually would prefer that you shut down the deal if it needs to be shut down. Now, for example, a deal that might need to be shut down is, I did an inspection where a guy's neighbor shows up to this old man, and the old man is about 70, he's got no money, and he says, "Hey, I had a dream that you should buy my house from me." And the house was on the hill, it was sliding down the hill, one of the walls was actually falling away from the rest of the house. There was no foundation beneath one of the major walls. There was no heating system. The buyer had no savings, no construction background. Basically, he was going to spend his life savings on a house that he did not have either the means nor the knowledge to fix. You can imagine the amount of work it would take to put in a heating system in a house. And I said, "Well, do you have the money to do that?" "No, but I'll save up." And so at that point, I actually stopped in the middle of the inspection and said, "Look, I cannot in good conscience even continue. You are not the right buyer for this house, and I'm not going to make any bones about it. I'm not going to finish this inspection for you." It was that big a deal to me. So I went like a whipped puppy into the realtor, and I said, "Look, sorry, but I just killed your deal." And I expect him to be, upset or basically grimace and say, "Okay, well, Instead, he thanked me because he figured that I would be the only guy who could, and it turned out the client was his dad, who wouldn't take his son, the realtor's advice. It had to come from somebody else. We've all been there. He said, "I could not talk my dad out of buying this house." So there are times when killing the deal is the right thing to do. Just because a home has structural issues, or maybe it has meth issues or mold, or maybe it's got asbestos or whatever it is, that alone is not justification for killing a deal. What is justification is if you've got somebody who, let's say it's asbestos, and the asbestos is clear throughout. Maybe that person has no idea what to do with asbestos. They have no time. They have no extra money. They don't really have the means to call somebody. They need to get in. They need to live in this house right now. Then you say, "Hey, look, this doesn't look like this property is right for you." So that is the exception. But the general rule is that you are going to want to, your job is not to pass or fail any home. It is to make very clear what the issues are of the home to the buyer so that the buyer can make a clear decision as to whether this is a picture that they want to buy. And, that goes back to the realtor. If you got to kill a deal, everybody understands that. But don't kill a deal over something stupid. For example, I mentioned asbestos. And let's say that they're buying a home built in maybe 1970. Maybe it's got asbestos duct wrap. Maybe it's got asbestos popcorn ceiling texture. That is what it is. It kind of comes with those older homes. And there are ways to deal with that. It's not that big a deal. You can go to the asbestos podcast for that. But the point I'm making is that, if you're finding asbestos or something like that, maybe it's a hot neutral reverse electrical plug, you provide that information to the client. You do not provide the summary to them as to whether the asbestos or the hot neutral reverse plug or the raccoons in the wall means they should or should not buy that house. This is important to the realtor because in many cases, there's a budget the realtor's got to deal with, and in those same cases, maybe the home they found is the best home that this particular buyer can afford. You don't know that information. So again, your role is not to say pass or fail. It's to say, here's the condition of this home. And that is what the realtor needs from you. By the way, don't make the realtor look dumb. If you do, that will be the last time he or she calls you. And you just don't need to make anybody look dumb. You don't need to try to pretend that you're smarter or better or stronger or quicker or anything else. You're just there to take care of the client. You got a job to do. You take care of that client well, and they will decide if you're awesome. You don't need to tell them that you're awesome. That kind of goes without saying, you would think. But I see a lot of inspectors that try to pretend that they are awesome, and they're not. Have the client there when you inspect. This is huge, and if you're intending to be on my team, it's going to be something that I require. Now let's go back to the asbestos, for example, because I just mentioned that. If you have the client there, you can say, okay, here's the asbestos, it's asbestos duct wrap, you can do this and this and this with it, and then you can move on and find whatever other problems are in the home. By contrast, if you have them show up at the end, or if they just get the report and the report says, oh, by the way, this home has asbestos, the client might run. And that's going to piss off the agent. And also, if you don't have 2 hours to clearly identify to the client that this is asbestos, that's not asbestos over there, this is asbestos, and this is what it's going to cost you, these are the risks, this is how to deal with it, blah, blah, blah. If you don't have that 2 hours to give that information to them, they're going to be calling you later, and or their lawyer may be getting a hold of your lawyer, and you just don't need that. So you've got to have the client there. That's going to make you very unique as a home inspector, and that is exactly what you're looking for. Everybody else likes the client to show up at the end. You can give far better service if you have the client there the entire time. Teach and educate them, honor them, serve them, and make sure that at the end of the inspection, they put their face in front of you and say, thank you for that. You helped me. Now I know what to do. I'm ready to take the next step. And whether that's to keep going or whether it's to run away and go find another home, if they don't come to you and say, that was awesome, you really helped me, you really served me, and if they don't give you a heartfelt level of appreciation, you failed. And you have missed an opportunity to create a customer who will keep sending clients to you over the years. The value of that customer, and this is probably the next segment I need to cover, is you need to understand the value of a client. Somebody sends you a referral, or maybe you just get a phone call, and somebody says, okay, go do my home inspection. And so you show up, you meet them there, you do the inspection, you go through the motions, you mail it in, and you give them a report, and they say, okay, thank you. That customer was worth, I'm going to say $400 to you. That's what I presently charge. And that's a failure. By contrast, if you get that call, you do the inspection, you've got them there, you teach them, you give them everything you've got inside, you take extra time to make sure that you personally appreciate them and that you're giving them as much knowledge as they need to be able to manage their home well. Now all of a sudden this guy, he puts his face in front of you and he says, thank you. And then he goes to his realtor and he says, that home inspector was awesome. And the realtor says, oh, great, I can refer that guy over and over and over again, and I can tell my other realtor friends about this guy. If you start doing the math, if this realtor is selling one home per month and he's referring every one of those to you, over a 10-year period of time, $50,000 realtor. That's what this guy is worth if you get one inspection per month from him each month for 10 years. Not only that, so this realtor is worth $50,000 to you personally over the next 10 years. I actually have had realtors work with me for well over 20 years, and then they refer others to me. They became brokers and referred all the agents that worked for them to me. The one guy that I'm thinking of specifically has to have been worth considerably more than $100,000. So, this is not a $400 home inspection. You are earning somebody's respect and loyalty and trust, And when you do that, that can be worth six figures at least, often more. So this is what you are working to earn. And this is also why you want to make sure that you don't make the realtor look bad, because, you know, if so, and you piss him off and he's offended, you just lost $100,000. Nobody wants to do that. So, you know, take care of those clients and honor them. Have the client be there when you inspect, be punctual. You know, what I tell a lot of the guys that I train here locally is that you get one mistake maximum. And sometimes that mistake can be a technical issue where maybe, you know, you might miss a cracked window, or maybe there's a, you know, some burner on the stove or whatever. You are allowed a maximum of one. And if you show up in a nasty truck or a car or, you know, something that just doesn't look professional, that's your one mistake. If you show up in a shirt that doesn't have a logo on it, that's your one mistake. Most people will give you the benefit of the doubt once. If you do more than that, then they've lost faith in you and you suck and you're not going to get recommended and you're far more likely to get sued. So have all the basics, and we're going to talk about that in another segment. But one of those mistakes that you're allowed is being on time. If you show up 10 minutes late, that's the one mistake. Everything else you do for the next 2 hours better be perfection, or you suck and you've lost the respect of the client. So bottom line, punctual. Get there early and make sure that the one mistake isn't used up before you even meet the person. Never assume. Don't assume that maybe if you've got a man and a woman and they're looking at a house, don't assume that they're married. That happened to me. Don't assume that they're about to get married. In one case, I had a couple that, you know, they were buying the home together. And so I assumed they were married, and I said something along those lines, and I don't even remember what was said, but apparently that really annoyed the woman, because she thought that me assuming that they were married or whatever meant that they should be married, and it resulted in an argument, almost lost the deal, and, you know, then the realtor had to cover for something that I said without even thinking about it. So don't assume that they're married or anything like that. Never assume that somebody is older or younger. You know, guessing people's ages, of course, fraught with a ton of danger. And so just be careful about what you say about what you believe. Better off to keep very mum about those sorts of things. And it's worth stating again, you never know it all. Even if you think you do, you don't. And that's a bigger problem. Thinking that you know everything is actually a bigger problem than not knowing, because, you know, the arrogance and you know, if you're quoting code, for example, and it's a 1970 home, you better be quoting 1970 code. And if you're quoting maybe plumbing code for 1970, you better have been certified as a plumber in 1970 so that you are licensed to actually speak of 1970 code. Once you start thinking you know it all, then it's time to go back to the books and find out the myriad of things that you don't know. Much better to have a quiet strength than pretend that you're a big shot when everybody else around you knows that you're not. You're a home inspector. You'll never be a big shot. Neither will I. We'll be back in the next segment with, speaking of don't, with a set of don'ts to do as an inspector.